I have so much confidence in the Kansas City Chiefs. In the last 5 years since Patrick Mahomes got there, I have seen them reload so many times. And I feel like every year there's some new narrative. Oh no, they lost this guy and it's going to really affect their season and they're not going to be the same without insert literally any name. I got to just really be clear here. As long as they have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City is going to be a Super Bowl contender. And I feel like it somehow doesn't get enough attention that they literally lost what I would call the best receiver in the NFL, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill left the team, got traded to Miami. So they lost again, arguably the best receiver in the NFL. And then right after that happened, that same year, Kansas City won the Super Bowl. They lost Tyreek Hill and still won the Super Bowl. That was a cornerstone moment for me. And I'm not going to forget this. I am not going to forget when every fall from here on out, the rest of Patrick Mahomes' career, there's a narrative like, oh no, they lost this player or that guy. I'm going to say, well, remember when Tyreek Hill left and they won a Super Bowl? Let's not hit the panic button. They've got Patrick Mahomes. They've got Andy Reid. They're a Super Bowl contender. They're a really good football team. And one of the more interesting narratives this year in the NFL is Eric Bieniemy left his job as the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. He is now in Washington trying to prove himself and show what he can do without Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Trying to stand alone and, I think, become a head coach eventually. And this is not awesome, what I'm about to say, but it's true. The worst thing I think that can be said about Eric Bieniemy is that I believe Kansas City is going to be totally fine without him. He's going to leave, and there's going to be no big impact in Kansas City. The offense is going to be fine. And how do you measure what a guy can do if he leaves and nothing changes? I mean, they're like, did he really make an impact? We'll see what he can do in Washington, but when I put it that way and I realized, like, hey, Kansas City is going to be fine without him, that does hurt Eric Bieniemy. And I thought this year, Kansas City made a couple moves I really liked. They added a right tackle, Jawan Taylor. He left Jacksonville. He's only 25 years old, a lot of potential there. They got a new left tackle, Donovan Smith, who came over after kind of a down year in Tampa last fall. So I think, look, Kansas City, they've got a really solid offensive line, great quarterback, great coach. And the more you win, the harder it is to keep your group of guys together. Because everybody wants to go get paid. You win, you have a lot of success, and you're like, hey, I want to get financially rewarded. And I think teams like Kansas City or Cincinnati are in a tough spot where you're a perennial borderline Super Bowl team every year. And your players are playing at a high level, they're going to want to leave. And you got to kind of reload. You got to find creative ways to rebuild your team every single year. And Eagles general manager Howie Roseman gets so much praise and respect as he's viewed as the best general manager in the NFL. He deserves that title, by the way. But I think the guy who's kind of unsung and underappreciated in the NFL is the Chiefs general manager, Brett Veach. Every year, somehow, they put a great team together around Kansas City that's capable of competing for a Super Bowl. Doesn't that count for something? I mean, look at the mess the LA Rams are right now. They won a Super Bowl 2 years ago, and then they fell apart. Their roster financially just fell apart. They couldn't afford to keep everybody. They're now like paying $72 million to players that aren't even on their football team. Kansas City hasn't had a moment like that. They have not fallen apart under Brett Veach. In fact, they've won 2 Super Bowls and been to 3 while he's been their general manager. They keep winning year in and year out. And I think because Brett Veach has Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback, he's got a great coach. He gets penalized and not viewed as his really smart, thoughtful general manager. But I just want to be clear, he just has sustained the level of success and level of roster around Patrick Mahomes every year with a lot of really smart creative moves, including getting 2 really good offensive linemen this offseason that are going to help Patrick Mahomes. So I think he's a general manager that deserves a little more credit as you look around the NFL. Here is what I find. Well, there's a couple things I find really interesting on this roster in Kansas City. Here's one thing, though. It's their pass rushers, in my opinion, still have a lot to prove. Last year's first-round pick, George Karlaftis, had 6 sacks as a rookie. That's pretty solid for a rookie season as a pass rusher. But I wonder, can George Karlaftis produce even more this fall in Kansas City? And then there's a concerning thing. It's not the end of the world. Again, Casey's going to be fine. But their other defensive end, Charles Omenihu is suspended for the first 6 games of the year. So, again, I wonder, especially early, they've got one of their defensive ends out. Can they get pressure on opposing quarterbacks? That's a big narrative that's got to be talked about in Kansas City. Now, the way they're going to get pressure is by blitzing. That's what they do in Kansas City. I feel like I'm saying Kansas City a lot too much. I'm going to try to cut that down. Maybe say KC. I'm not sure. But Steve Spagnuolo is their defensive coordinator, and I love the way he runs his defense. This defense doesn't have a lot of star players. They don't have any they've had over the years, Tyrann Mathieu, had a couple good players, but this year, and I think recently, they've been waning in their great, really name recognizable great players. But what they do is a lot of really complicated stuff that makes it really difficult for opposing quarterbacks. Players are moving, blitzes are coming at random times from random places. It's a really difficult defense to play against because of how complicated they are and because of all the different looks they can provide. So I think that's another parallel maybe between Cincinnati, actually, is that Cincinnati and Kansas City have a weaker pass rush and not the best defense when it comes to recognizable names, but they've got a really good scheme that makes it difficult for opposing quarterbacks. And so, man, I think these two teams are so parallel. Kansas City and Cincinnati, they've been playing each other in the AFC title game 2 years in a row, and they're both every year trying to just keep their group of guys together. And I like the way that Kansas City has done it this year. Now, the receiving room is probably the most interesting thing in Kansas City. First of all, their tight end, Travis Kelce, he's a star. He's amazing. Arguably, him or George Kittle are the best tight end in football. And I think while George Kittle's a better blocker, a better true tight end, I would actually continue that train of thought and say that Travis Kelce is the biggest mismatch in football. Him being guarded by a linebacker just is not fair and not possible. They also have a really solid, reliable receiver, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Came over from Green Bay at one point, and now he's in Kansas City playing really well. Did a lot of good stuff last year, had a couple big catches, but a lot of the, not only has Tyreek Hill left, Mecole Hardman left, a lot of the names you would recognize over the years catching passes for the Chiefs, they're gone. And kind of what's happening this year in Kansas City, and the biggest question is at receiver with them, because they got two guys, Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, that are being elevated into bigger, more key roles. Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore are unproven, but they're going to be expected to do a lot and really do some heavy lifting in this offense this year. Juju Smith-Schuster's gone. Mecole Hardman is gone. A lot of the guys over the years you've seen Patrick Mahomes throw passes to are no longer there. Now, there is a lot of potential with Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. They're both really fast. They're both explosive players. Ironically, they both have run 4.41 40-yard dash times. They're both incredibly quick. And Kadarius Toney's a former first-round pick. He was drafted by the Giants. Didn't quite work out in New York. Last year, he found a home in Kansas City. And it's a guy who, he had a touchdown in the Super Bowl. He's got so much potential. But the problem with Kadarius Toney over the years has been he can't stay on the field. He can't stay healthy. Kadarius Toney's been in the NFL for 3 years. That's 3 full seasons. He's only played 19 games. That is not great. That's a guy missing a lot of time due to injuries. So he's unproven. Talented and good when he plays, but hasn't done a lot. He's got to stay on the field. Sky Moore had 22 catches, no touchdowns as a rookie last year. That's fine, but he's unproven. Talented, really gifted athlete, but we'll see what he can do. So as I say, what I find interesting in Kansas City at the receiver position is, can these two young receivers step up and, show what they can do and really help Kansas City win? I think it's going to work. Again, I talked at the beginning of the segment about how I have seen Kansas City reload year after year after year. You're talking about Andy Reid, the best offensive coach in football. He can take talented players and put them in a good position to succeed, and I think that's exactly what they have with Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. You can't control injuries. I think Sky Moore is going to be awesome, and I'm hoping, please, that Kadarius Toney can stay healthy. He's literally dealing with a foot issue right now. So it's not we'll see. But when it comes down to it, you got to pick a side. I believe that the receiving core in Kansas City is going to be awesome, and it's going to all work out like it has year after year in Kansas City. There's no reason to believe this year will not be just like all the years of the past. So this fall, I have Kansas City going 12-5. I think they're going to make a deep playoff run, win their division. That's what they do. Again, 12-5. I think KC wins their division with a 5-1 record in their division, which is going to be key because it's going to help them win their division. They might have the same record as another team in their division. But 12-5, they're going to win their division, make a deep playoff run. That is what I see happening this fall with Kansas City. And the big question mark, can they get pressure on opposing quarterbacks, especially early on with Menahu out? And how do their young receivers Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney play as they get elevated into bigger roles than ever before?